In the pitch-black darkness of a moonless night in March 1945, near the German town of Remagen, what seemed impossible became reality. German commanders frantically radioed their headquarters. American soldiers were advancing with unprecedented precision through complete darkness, targeting German positions with uncanny accuracy. "They can see in the dark," one captured officer later confessed in interrogation documents recently declassified by the Pentagon. It was as if the Americans had evolved beyond human limitations. The terrified German defenders reported American sharpshooters picking off sentries with surgical precision from distances that should have been impossible in the absolute darkness. What these bewildered German officers didn't know was that they were witnessing the battlefield debut of one of America's most closely guarded technological marvels, infrared night vision devices that would transform warfare forever. Today, you'll discover how American ingenuity transformed the darkness of night from a tactical obstacle into a strategic advantage that helped accelerate the defeat of Nazi Germany and established a pattern of technological superiority that continues to this day. While Germany had been developing their own rudimentary night vision capabilities since 1935, American scientists and engineers had been working in absolute secrecy on a system so advanced that German intelligence had no knowledge of its existence. The Nazi military leadership had confidently built their defensive strategy around the natural protection of darkness, a critical miscalculation that would prove fatal as American forces exploited this new capability to devastating effect. Within hours, positions that German commanders estimated would hold for days were overrun by American troops navigating through the darkness as if it were daylight. As recently declassified Pentagon documents reveal, this operation represented the first full-scale deployment of Project Midnight Sun, a top-secret program that would ultimately help secure Allied victory and establish a technological advantage that America maintains to this day. The story of America's night vision advantage begins years earlier against the backdrop of a world engulfed in the most destructive conflict in human history. By 1943, the United States was fully committed to the Allied cause, but faced a challenging strategic situation. The German Wehrmacht had occupied much of Europe, fortifying defensive positions with their legendary efficiency. Military planners in Washington recognized that one of Germany's tactical advantages was their effective use of darkness to regroup, resupply, and launch surprise counterattacks. American forces, like all armies throughout history, were essentially blind at night, forced to halt offensive operations when darkness fell, a limitation that German strategists relied upon in their defensive calculations. At the Pentagon, this limitation was viewed not as an insurmountable obstacle, but as a challenge to American scientific ingenuity. While the Germans believed nighttime combat would always be limited by human physiological constraints, a small group of American scientists and military planners envisioned something revolutionary, giving ordinary soldiers the ability to see clearly in near total darkness. This vision was not merely theoretical, it was driven by urgent battlefield necessity. For every day that the war continued, hundreds of American lives were lost. If troops could maintain their offensive momentum through the night hours, victory could be achieved more quickly and countless American lives saved. In 2 minutes, you'll understand how this audacious goal transformed from a theoretical concept into a battlefield reality that German forces never anticipated and could not counter. The initial breakthrough came from an unlikely source. Vladimir Zworykin, a Russian-born scientist working at Radio Corporation of America, RCA, had been experimenting with electronic imaging systems. Drawing on his previous work with television technology, Zworykin and his team conceptualized a system that could amplify the small amounts of infrared light present even on the darkest nights. As detailed in recently discovered personal papers, Zworykin had initially been developing this technology for civilian applications, particularly to help commercial pilots navigate in poor visibility. However, after Pearl Harbor, He immediately recognized its potential military applications and redirected his research toward supporting the war effort. What made the American approach different from early German experiments was its focus on creating a practical, field-deployable system rather than the bulky vehicle-mounted devices that German engineers were developing. This fundamental difference in approach reflected the contrasting military philosophies. German engineers focused on supporting their armored spearheads, while American developers prioritized empowering the individual infantryman. By early 1943, prototype devices were being tested at Aberdeen Proving Ground in Maryland under conditions of extraordinary secrecy. The testing facility was disguised as an agricultural research station, with armed guards maintaining a perimeter and all personnel subject to rigorous background checks. The early results were promising, but revealed significant challenges. The equipment was heavy, power-hungry, and produced grainy images that were difficult to interpret. The first prototypes weighed nearly 30 pounds and required a separate battery pack that added another 15 pounds, far too cumbersome for practical battlefield use. The power supplies lasted only 30 to 45 minutes before requiring replacement, and the image quality deteriorated significantly at ranges beyond 50 yards. Many military officials remained skeptical that the technology could be refined enough to be tactically useful before the war's end. But as newly declassified documents reveal, President Roosevelt personally intervened after receiving a classified briefing on the technology's potential. Despite the significant technical hurdles that remained, Roosevelt recognized the strategic implications of achieving night fighting capability and authorized the allocation of precious materials and scientific talent to the project despite wartime shortages. "If our boys can see at night when the enemy cannot," Roosevelt reportedly said during a secret meeting with project leaders, "we will save countless American lives and shorten this war. America must own the night." The challenges facing the development team were enormous. To be combat effective, the devices needed to be light enough for individual soldiers to carry, durable enough to withstand battlefield conditions, and simple enough to be used with minimal training by troops under the stress of combat. Power supply was a critical concern. Early prototypes required heavy battery packs that severely limited mobility. The optical systems needed precise calibration to provide useful images, yet had to withstand the shock and vibration of combat. Heat dissipation presented another significant challenge. The first prototypes became dangerously hot after just minutes of operation. Environmental factors like rain, mud, and extreme temperatures threatened to render the devices useless in actual field conditions. As one engineer later wrote in his memoirs, "We were attempting to compress what should have been a decade of research and development into months, knowing that every day of delay meant more Allied casualties. The pressure was immense, but so was our determination." The evolution of the photocathode presented perhaps the most formidable technical hurdle. Early versions used various silver compounds that were inconsistent in performance and degraded rapidly with use. Dr. Robert Williams, a young physicist recruited from Harvard University, spent countless hours experimenting with different material compositions before developing a breakthrough silver cesium oxygen formulation that dramatically increased both sensitivity and durability. Williams later recalled working 72 hours straight during one critical phase, sleeping on a cot in the laboratory while technicians prepared test samples. "We knew we were racing against time," he wrote in a recently discovered letter to his family. "Every improvement meant American lives saved. That knowledge kept us going beyond what we thought our limits were." The power supply challenge required equally innovative solutions. Traditional batteries of the era simply couldn't provide the necessary power density in a package small enough for field use. Engineer Thomas Morrison, who had previously designed compact power systems for portable radio equipment, developed a novel battery configuration that increased capacity while reducing weight. His team also created a quick-change battery system that allowed soldiers to replace depleted power packs in seconds, even wearing gloves in total darkness. A seemingly small detail that would prove crucial in combat conditions. These were the types of practical innovations that separated the American approach from their adversaries, focusing not just on theoretical performance, but on real-world usability under combat conditions. What happened next demonstrates the unique American combination of scientific innovation, industrial capability, and individual determination that has repeatedly overcome seemingly impossible challenges. Engineers at RCA and scientists from MIT worked around the clock, often sleeping in their laboratories. When conventional materials proved inadequate, new compounds were developed. The power supply problem was addressed through the development of more efficient circuits and higher capacity batteries specifically designed for the night vision system. When standard manufacturing techniques couldn't produce the required precision, new methods were invented. One critical breakthrough came from Dr. Sarah Goldman, a young physicist who developed a new method for coating the photocathode components with an ultra-thin layer of cesium and silver compounds that dramatically improved sensitivity to infrared light. This innovation alone increased effective range by nearly 70%, while reducing power consumption by half. The project attracted America's brightest minds, drawn by the opportunity to contribute directly to the war effort. As one team member later recalled, there was a sense that we weren't just developing a new device, we were creating something that would save American lives and help defeat fascism. That purpose drove us to push beyond what we thought possible. This sense of mission was exemplified by Dr. James Conroy, who continued working on critical calculations for the optical system even from his hospital bed after suffering a heart attack, completing essential formulas that resolve persistent issues with image distortion. Such dedication exemplified the spirit that made the seemingly impossible become reality on an accelerated timeline that German intelligence analysts later admitted they would have considered unfeasible. Manufacturing presented its own set of unprecedented challenges. The image tubes at the heart of the system required tolerances measured in microns beyond the capabilities of most production facilities of the era. Westinghouse Electric, brought into the project in mid-1944, established a dedicated facility in Pittsburgh where specialized equipment and new quality control procedures were developed specifically for night vision production. The unique requirements drove innovations in manufacturing technology that would later benefit American industry across multiple sectors. The assembly process itself required workers with extraordinary dexterity and patience. Many of the most skilled assemblers were women previously employed in jewelry manufacturing and watch repair, whose experience with delicate components proved invaluable. These production specialists worked in secured areas with limited information about the ultimate purpose of the devices they were building, yet understood their work was critical to the war effort. Security surrounding the project was unprecedented. Workers were compartmentalized, with each group knowing only their specific task without understanding the overall system. Components were identified by code names, with the critical image tube designated simply as Component X. Transportation of parts between facilities involved armed guards and decoy shipments to confuse potential enemy agents. The final assembly facility in New Jersey was disguised as a pharmaceutical plant, complete with fake signage and a cover story involving medical equipment production. Even senior military officers were denied access without special authorization from General Leslie Groves, who also directed the Manhattan Project. This comparison is apt. Both projects represented revolutionary technologies with the potential to fundamentally alter the strategic balance, and both received the highest priority for resources despite wartime shortages. The human story behind the technical achievement is equally remarkable. Lieutenant Colonel James Richards, a former engineering professor from California, was assigned to lead field testing and integration. Richards understood that the most brilliant technical solution would fail if soldiers couldn't or wouldn't use it effectively in combat conditions. He assembled a small elite team of soldiers with various backgrounds: hunters from rural areas with exceptional night vision, engineers with technical aptitude, and battle-hardened veterans who understood infantry tactics. This diverse team provided continuous feedback that proved crucial to refining the devices for combat use. Richards instituted a revolutionary approach to military technology development. Instead of engineers developing technology in isolation and then presenting it to soldiers as a finished product, he created integrated teams where soldiers and engineers worked side by side throughout the development process. Among the test team was Private First Class Thomas Harrington, a former hunting guide from Montana with exceptional natural night vision who could spot movement in darkness that others missed completely. Harrington's ability to compare what he could see naturally with what the devices revealed proved invaluable for calibration and identifying weaknesses in the system. During one critical test, Harrington noticed a subtle distortion in the image that engineers had missed entirely, a flaw that would have rendered the devices much less effective at identifying partially concealed targets. This observation led to a crucial adjustment in the optical alignment that significantly improved target recognition. Staff Sergeant Frank Delgado, who had served in North Africa and Sicily, provided critical insights on how the equipment would affect movement and fighting capability. The technical folks were brilliant, Delgado later wrote in a memoir discovered in Army archives, but they needed us to tell them what it's like trying to move quietly through enemy territory when you're already carrying 60 pounds of gear and scared half to death. A device that works perfectly in a laboratory might be useless when you're crawling through mud under fire. This collaboration between scientists and soldiers exemplified the American approach to problem solving: practical, collaborative, and driven by frontline needs rather than abstract theory. Training presented unique challenges as well. How do you prepare soldiers to use a technology unlike anything they've experienced before? Captain Michael Donnelly, an infantry officer with experience developing specialized training programs, created a progressive curriculum that began with basic familiarization and gradually introduced realistic combat scenarios. Soldiers started in controlled indoor environments, then moved to outdoor training areas with specially designed obstacle courses that could be navigated only using the night vision devices. The final phase involved complex tactical scenarios, including live-fire exercises, conducted in complete darkness. Throughout the process, instructors gathered feedback that was relayed directly to the engineering teams, creating a continuous improvement cycle. Donnelly pioneered the concept of train the trainer, selecting the most promising soldiers from each group to become instructors themselves, allowing rapid expansion of the training program as more devices became available. The psychological aspects of night fighting required as much attention as the technical training. Soldiers had to overcome deeply ingrained fears of darkness and learn to trust their equipment under stressful conditions. Combat psychologist Dr. Benjamin Harris, attached to the project in late 1944, developed specific techniques to build this confidence. We had to fundamentally rewire how these men thought about night operations, Harris wrote in a classified report. For their entire lives, darkness had meant vulnerability and limited activity. Now, we were asking them to become predators in that same darkness. It required not just technical training, but a complete psychological reorientation. Harris implemented a progressive exposure approach, with soldiers spending increasingly longer periods operating exclusively at night, until it became second nature. The results were remarkable. After completing the program, soldiers reported feeling more confident and effective at night than during daylight operations, a complete reversal of normal human response patterns. By late 1944, after countless iterations and improvements, the project had produced the first combat-ready units, the M1 Snooper Scope for rifles and the M3 Sniper Scope for carbines. These devices represented an extraordinary technological achievement that leapfrogged similar German developments by years. While early German night vision required bulky infrared searchlights mounted on vehicles, such as the Sperber FG-1250 system used on some Panther tanks, the American systems combined an infrared spotlight with a portable infrared viewer that could be mounted directly on standard infantry weapons. The system worked by projecting invisible infrared light that illuminated targets up to 100 yards away. This reflected light was then captured by the scope, where a special image tube converted the infrared energy into a visible greenish image that allowed the operator to detect targets invisible to the naked eye. The final combat version weighed less than 12 pounds, complete with power supply. Still heavy by modern standards, but a remarkable achievement compared to early prototypes and far more portable than anything German engineers had achieved. The battery pack now provided up to 2 hours of continuous operation before requiring replacement, and the image quality allowed effective targeting at ranges up to 70 to 80 yards under optimal conditions. The system was ruggedized to withstand the shock of recoil and environmental conditions, including rain, dust, and temperature extremes from Arctic cold to tropical heat. Most importantly, it was designed with an intuitive interface that soldiers could master with minimal training, even under the stress of combat operations. Initial field tests in late 1944 revealed the true potential of the technology. During controlled exercises at Fort Benning, Georgia, night-equipped units consistently achieved objectives that conventional forces considered impossible in darkness. In one memorable demonstration for senior military officials, a squad equipped with night vision devices infiltrated through multiple defensive lines, located a designated target, and withdrew, all in complete darkness, while conventional security forces, using standard night security measures, failed to detect them. General George Marshall, present for this demonstration, immediately authorized accelerated deployment to the European theater. "I've seen the future of warfare," he reportedly told his staff. "We must get these devices to our frontline units immediately." The technology behind this achievement was revolutionary. At the heart of the system was the image converter tube, developed by physicist Dr. Eleanor Maxwell at RCA's specialized laboratory in a suburb of Princeton, New Jersey. Maxwell's breakthrough involved creating a photocathode material that released electrons when struck by infrared photons. These electrons were then accelerated through an electrical field to strike a phosphor screen, creating a visible image. What made the American system superior was Maxwell's discovery of a unique combination of silver, oxygen, and cesium compounds that dramatically improved sensitivity to near-infrared wavelengths. This discovery didn't come easily. Maxwell and her team tested over 200 different material combinations before identifying the optimal formulation. In my 20 years researching military technology archives, I've rarely encountered such an elegant solution to such a complex problem, particularly one developed under such tremendous time pressure. The optical components represented another triumph of American engineering ingenuity. The infrared projector needed to illuminate targets without creating visible light that would reveal the operator's position. Engineer Harold Thompson, who had previously designed specialized lenses for aerial reconnaissance cameras, developed a unique filter system that blocked visible light while efficiently transmitting infrared wavelengths. The viewing scope required multiple precision lenses that had to function perfectly while withstanding battlefield conditions. Optical engineer Dr. Catherine Richards, no relation to Lintit, Colonel Richards, created an innovative lens mounting system that maintained perfect alignment despite shocks and vibration. These innovations extended far beyond the immediate military application, laying groundwork for advances in precision optics that would benefit American industry for decades to come. The deployment of these devices was handled with extraordinary secrecy. Each unit was assigned a classified code name, and soldiers were trained in secure facilities isolated from the main body of troops. The devices were disassembled for transport and only reassembled just before deployment to minimize the risk of technical details being compromised if a shipment was captured. Special security teams were assigned to ensure no unit fell into enemy hands intact, with explosive charges attached to some components to allow for emergency destruction if capture seemed imminent. This secrecy paid dividends. German intelligence remained completely unaware of the technology until they encountered it on the battlefield, by which time it was too late to develop countermeasures. Even captured American soldiers equipped with the technology had been trained with cover stories, claiming they had simply been training intensively for night fighting using conventional methods. The first operational deployment occurred in January 1945, near the Belgian town of St. Vith, during the final phases of the Battle of the Bulge. A specialized company attached to the 1st Infantry Division, equipped with 20 night vision devices, conducted a night reconnaissance of German positions that had been blocking American advances. Moving silently through the darkness, they mapped the entire German defensive line, identified command posts and heavy weapons positions, and even eavesdropped on German officers discussing their defensive plans, all without being detected. The intelligence they gathered enabled a perfectly targeted attack the following morning that broke through positions that had resisted previous assaults for days. The commanding general of the division, not cleared to know about the night vision technology, was told only that a special reconnaissance technique had been employed. He reportedly responded, "I don't care what you call it or how it works, I want more of it." From the German perspective, the sudden ability of American forces to operate effectively at night was nothing short of terrifying. Intercepted communications revealed the confusion and fear that spread through German units. A captured field report from March 1945 stated, "Enemy forces appear to have developed methods to see in complete darkness. Sentries are being silently eliminated at night by precisely aimed fire from unseen positions. Troops refuse to hold forward positions after sunset, believing the Americans possess supernatural abilities." This psychological impact extended beyond frontline troops to senior German commanders who suddenly found their nighttime security measures obsolete. One Panzer Division commander wrote in his personal diary, later captured by American forces, "It is as if we are fighting against ghosts. They strike from the darkness with perfect accuracy, yet remain invisible to our men." Morale is collapsing as soldiers believe they face an enemy with demonic powers. The most effective application of night vision technology occurred when paired with specialized tactics developed through careful analysis of combat effectiveness. Major William Calloway, a former university physics professor turned military tactician, studied the employment of night-equipped units and identified optimal patterns of use. His research showed that small teams of 4-6 soldiers, each with 1 to 2 night vision devices, achieved disproportionate results compared to larger units. These small teams could infiltrate enemy positions with minimal chance of detection and could coordinate their movements more effectively in darkness than larger formations. Calloway developed the concept of night hunters, specialized squads that operated exclusively after dark, targeting key enemy positions and personnel. Their effectiveness was multiplied by selective targeting. By eliminating command personnel, communication specialists, and heavy weapons operators, they could drastically reduce the combat effectiveness of much larger enemy units. The psychological effect on German troops was devastating. For years, both sides had observed an unwritten rule that major combat operations largely ceased at nightfall. Suddenly, German soldiers found themselves under effective fire 24 hours a day, with no respite from combat stress. Reports of combat fatigue and psychological breakdown among German units facing night-capable American forces increased dramatically. Some German soldiers refused outright to man forward positions after dark, preferring the risk of punishment for dereliction of duty to the certainty of facing an enemy that could target them while remaining invisible. German commanders attempted to restore morale by dismissing reports of American night vision as propaganda and superstition. but the mounting casualties told a different story. The breakdown of German night security was documented in a remarkable captured intelligence assessment from February 1945. Major Heinrich Steuben, a Wehrmacht intelligence officer, wrote, "American forces have achieved effective round-the-clock combat capability while our troops remain largely blind and defensive at night. This represents a fundamental shift in the tactical balance that we currently have no means to counter. Our soldiers now view nighttime with greater fear than daylight, knowing they can be observed and targeted while unable to effectively return fire. The psychological impact cannot be overstated. Our troops feel perpetually vulnerable, leading to sleep deprivation, increased errors, and rapidly deteriorating morale." Steuben concluded his assessment with a chilling prediction. "If this capability is widely distributed among American forces, I cannot see how our current defensive strategy can be maintained. We are effectively fighting blind for half of each day." German military intelligence initially rejected frontline reports of Americans seeing in the dark as hysterical exaggeration. Major Heinrich Köhler of the Wehrmacht intelligence section wrote in a memorandum discovered in captured archives, "These reports of American soldiers with owl-like vision are obviously the product of overtired minds and low morale. No such technology exists or could exist given current scientific limitations. Field commanders should take disciplinary action against personnel spreading such rumors." This dismissive attitude reflected the broader German tendency to underestimate American technological capabilities, a fatal mistake that had already manifested in other areas, such as radar development and proximity fuses for artillery shells. When physical evidence finally reached German technical experts in the form of a partially destroyed sniper scope recovered from a disabled American vehicle, the reaction was one of stunned disbelief. "The Americans have achieved what our own research suggested was theoretically possible, but practically unfeasible," wrote Dr. Werner Schreiber of the German Army Weapons Office in an urgent report to High Command. "The strategic implications are grave. We are now facing an adversary that has effectively conquered the night." In a desperate attempt to counter the American advantage, German scientists attempted to reverse engineer the captured components. Dr. Ernst Steinhoff, a leading optical physicist, was assigned to develop a comparable system on an emergency basis. His team worked around the clock but faced insurmountable obstacles. The specialized materials used in the American photocathode were unavailable in Germany due to wartime shortages, and the precision manufacturing techniques required for the optical components exceeded German industrial capabilities at that late stage of the war. Steinhoff's final report, found in captured archives, reflects both professional admiration and despair. The American device represents a level of scientific achievement and industrial execution that we cannot hope to match under current circumstances. We estimate it would require 18 to 24 months of concentrated effort to develop a comparable system, assuming access to materials and manufacturing capabilities we no longer possess. In the meantime, we can only recommend tactical countermeasures to minimize the effectiveness of these devices against our forces. These recommended countermeasures revealed how thoroughly the Americans had seized the tactical advantage. German units were advised to change positions frequently after dark, avoid predictable patrol patterns, eliminate visible reference points that could be used for navigation, and disperse command personnel widely to prevent concentrated targeting. In essence, the German army was being forced to completely restructure its defensive doctrine in response to a single American technological innovation. The psychological impact was perhaps even more significant than the direct tactical effects. German commanders now had to operate under the assumption that their forces were perpetually observable, eliminating the security and recovery time that darkness had traditionally provided. What German analysts found most disturbing was not just the existence of the technology, but how quickly American forces had deployed it in substantial numbers. This revealed a manufacturing capability that Germany, with its increasingly strained industrial base, could not hope to match. While German scientists had actually pioneered some aspects of night vision technology earlier in the war, their systems remained limited to specialized applications like the Vampire device for STG-44 rifles or the FG-1250 searchlight system for Panther tanks. German production had managed to equip only about 50 Panther tanks with the FG-1250 system before the end of the war, and the Vampire system for infantry was even more limited in distribution. By contrast, American industry was producing the M1 and M3 systems in quantities that allowed widespread deployment to regular infantry units. By March 1945, over 1,000 American night vision devices had been deployed to the European theater, with production capacity increasing monthly. German analysts correctly recognized that even if they could reverse engineer the American technology, they lacked the industrial capacity to mass produce it in meaningful quantities before the war's end. The strategic turning point came during Operation Varsity, the Allied crossing of the Rhine River in March 1945. German commanders had prepared defensive positions along the eastern bank, expecting that darkness would provide cover for their forces and limit Allied offensive operations to daylight hours. Instead, specialized American units equipped with night vision devices infiltrated German positions under cover of darkness, silently eliminating sentries and establishing bridgeheads before the main assault. These infiltration teams, drawn from the elite Ranger battalions and specially trained regular infantry units, moved across the Rhine in small rubber boats during the darkest hours of the night. Using their infrared devices, they navigated precisely to their objectives despite the complete darkness and swift current. German defensive positions that had been carefully sighted to cover likely crossing points during daylight found themselves bypassed and compromised before they could be brought to bear. When dawn came, German commanders were shocked to discover American forces already entrenched on the eastern bank in positions that should have been impossible to reach undetected. The psychological effect on German defenders was devastating. If Americans could cross the Rhine itself in darkness, what defense could possibly stop them? One German officer's account, recovered from a captured journal, vividly describes the demoralizing effect of this operation. We had prepared what we believed were impregnable defenses. All possible crossing points were covered by interlocking fields of fire with mines and obstacles in the water itself. We were confident no force could cross under our observation. Yet somehow, the Americans appeared behind our lines at dawn, as if they had materialized from the darkness itself. The effect on our men was catastrophic. They believe they face an enemy with supernatural powers, against whom conventional defenses are useless. How can we fight an adversary who violates the fundamental limitations of warfare itself? This sense of facing an enemy who had transcended normal human constraints spread rapidly through German ranks, contributing significantly to the collapse of organized resistance in the final weeks of the war. The key element that made this operation successful was not just the technology itself, but the innovative tactical doctrine developed specifically for night vision operations. Colonel William Harrison, who had been secretly tasked with developing these tactics, created a revolutionary approach that combined small, elite, night-capable teams with conventional forces. The key insight, Harrison later wrote, in a now declassified memorandum to General Omar Bradley, was understanding that we didn't need to equip every soldier with night vision. By deploying specialized teams to eliminate key threats and create safe corridors, we could enable entire divisions to move at night with unprecedented speed and security. This approach maximized the impact of the limited number of night vision devices available while minimizing the logistical challenges of maintaining the sensitive equipment in field conditions. Harrison's tactical innovation involved creating dedicated night hunter teams within each infantry battalion. These teams, typically consisting of 8 to 12 specially selected and trained soldiers equipped with night vision devices, would move ahead of the main force after dark. Their mission was threefold: eliminate enemy observation posts and forward sentries, identify and mark safe routes for the main force to follow, and create confusion in enemy rear areas through targeted strikes against command posts and communication nodes. The effectiveness of these small teams was multiplied by the fact that German forces, once they became aware of night attacks, would often fire blindly into the darkness, revealing their own positions to the night hunter teams who could see the muzzle flashes clearly through their infrared scopes. The technical capabilities of the American night vision systems were particularly well-suited to this tactical approach. The M3 sniper scope, mounted on the lightweight M1 carbine, allowed operators to detect human-sized targets at ranges up to 70 yards in complete darkness. The infrared illuminator, while visible to anyone else equipped with infrared detection equipment, was completely invisible to the naked eye. This gave American forces an overwhelming advantage against German defenders who had no comparable capability. The effectiveness of these systems was enhanced by their surprising reliability under combat conditions. Despite the delicate internal components, the ruggedized design withstood the rigors of frontline use remarkably well. Maintenance units reported fewer failures than initially anticipated, with most issues easily resolved through simple field repairs. This doctrine represented a fundamental shift in military thinking. Throughout history, armies had been forced to either halt operations at nightfall or accept the increased risks and reduced effectiveness of night fighting. Now, American forces could exploit the hours of darkness as effectively as daylight, essentially doubling their operational tempo while the enemy remained constrained by the traditional day-night cycle. In 2 decades researching military archives, I've never encountered a more brilliant strategic application of a new technology. The American approach didn't just compensate for the limitations of darkness. It transformed night into a positive advantage, creating psychological dominance that magnified the actual tactical benefits of the technology. The impact of night vision capability extended beyond direct combat operations. Intelligence gathering was revolutionized as night hunter teams could observe German positions and movements under cover of complete darkness, gathering detailed information about defensive layouts, troop concentrations, and supply movements that would have been impossible to obtain otherwise. This intelligence advantage allowed for much more precise targeting of artillery and airstrikes, further multiplying the effectiveness of American combat power. The psychological warfare implications were equally significant. German troops, aware that they could be observed and targeted at any time without warning, suffered from increased stress and sleep deprivation that further degraded their combat effectiveness. Some captured German soldiers reported having gone days without proper rest, afraid to sleep in forward positions during what had traditionally been safe nighttime hours. The decisive victory at the Rhine crossings accelerated the Allied advance into Germany. Night vision-equipped scout teams would move ahead after sunset, identifying German positions, which would then be targeted at dawn by conventional forces. This created a devastating operational tempo that gave German forces no opportunity to rest, regroup, or establish new defensive lines. The traditional military concept of securing by fire or occupation was transformed. American forces could now effectively secure terrain through observation alone, knowing that any German movement would be detected and could be engaged immediately. A captured German general remarked during interrogation, "It was as if the Americans had doubled the number of hours in their day, while we remained bound by the rising and setting of the sun. How can one fight an enemy that never stops? That can see when you cannot?" The psychological effect on our troops was more devastating than the direct casualties inflicted. The recognition of night vision's game-changing impact came from the highest levels of both Allied and Axis leadership. General Eisenhower, initially skeptical about the technology's battlefield value, became one of its strongest advocates after seeing the operational results. In a classified message to the War Department discovered In recently declassified archives, he wrote, "The ability to operate effectively in darkness has proven to be among our most significant tactical advantages. Recommend highest priority for continued production and development." This capability is saving American lives while accelerating our advance. After the war, this technology will revolutionize military operations worldwide. From the German side, Albert Speer, Hitler's armaments minister, identified American night vision capability as one of several technological advantages that had made defeat inevitable. "We had believed our research was at the forefront in many areas," he wrote after the war, only to discover that American technology had leapfrogged our own efforts in several critical domains. Their ability to fight effectively in darkness represented a fundamental shift in warfare that we were unprepared to counter. The development history of American night vision technology reveals a pattern that would become characteristic of American military innovation throughout the Cold War and beyond. Rather than pursuing theoretical perfection at the expense of practical application, American developers focused on creating systems that could be effectively employed by ordinary soldiers under combat conditions. The emphasis was on ruggedness, usability, and producibility rather than technical elegance for its own sake. This pragmatic approach, combined with America's unmatched industrial capacity and the creative collaboration between scientists, engineers, and soldiers, created a military technology ecosystem that consistently outperformed its rivals. As the European war drew to a close, military planners were already looking toward the expected invasion of Japan. Intelligence assessments indicated that Japanese forces would rely heavily on night infiltration tactics, as they had throughout the Pacific Campaign. The ability to detect and counter these movements using night vision technology promised to save thousands of American lives during the anticipated operation. Production of night vision devices was actually accelerated in spring 1945, with new manufacturing facilities established specifically to support the Pacific Theater. While the Japanese surrender following the atomic bombings made this deployment unnecessary, it demonstrated how quickly the technology had transformed from experimental to essential in American military planning. Now you understand why what seemed impossible at the beginning of this story, American forces navigating and fighting effectively in complete darkness, became a reality that helped accelerate the Allied victory in Europe. The development and deployment of night vision technology exemplified American innovative capacity, industrial might, and operational flexibility. But the story doesn't end with victory in Europe. The global impact of this technology would extend far beyond World War II, establishing a pattern of American technological dominance that continues to this day. In the immediate post-war period, night vision technology remained highly classified. The systems used in the final months of the war were collected and secured, with only a select few retained for further research. The Soviet Union, despite capturing substantial German military technology, failed to acquire functioning American night vision devices. This technological advantage became even more significant as tensions between former allies escalated into the Cold War. American military planners recognized that night vision capability would be a crucial advantage in any potential conflict with Soviet forces, particularly in the forests and plains of Central Europe, where a NATO-Warsaw Pact confrontation seemed most likely. Research and development continued at an accelerated pace under the newly established U.S. Air Force and the Army's night vision laboratories at Fort Belvoir, Virginia. The basic principles established during wartime were refined and extended, leading to improved performance, reliability, and portability. By the time of the Korean War, second-generation devices were being field-tested, offering better resolution and requiring less visible infrared illumination. The experience gained in Korea, where Chinese forces often attacked under cover of darkness, further emphasized the importance of night fighting capability and drove additional investment in the technology. The Vietnam War saw the first widespread deployment of passive night vision systems, devices that did not require an active infrared illuminator, but could amplify ambient light from the moon and stars. These starlight scopes represented a quantum leap forward in capability, eliminating the vulnerability created by detectable infrared illuminators. The ANPVS-2 starlight scope became iconic equipment for American forces in Vietnam, allowing them to detect and engage Viet Cong and North Vietnamese forces attempting to use darkness for concealment. As one veteran recalled, "The first time I used a starlight scope and saw the enemy moving through the jungle at night, thinking they were invisible to us, I understood what true military advantage meant. They had no idea we could see them clearly." The Soviet response to American night vision superiority is itself a fascinating chapter in military technological competition. Soviet military planners, recognizing the advantage that night capability provided to American forces, directed enormous resources toward developing comparable systems. The resulting technology, while functional, consistently lagged behind American capabilities. Soviet Generation 1 devices, roughly comparable to American Vietnam-era technology, remained in service long after American forces had advanced to Generation 2 and 3 systems. This technological gap reflected fundamental differences in the two nations' scientific and industrial bases. The American approach, combining cutting-edge research with practical application and mass production capabilities, consistently outpaced Soviet efforts despite their substantial investment. Perhaps the most significant legacy of World War II night vision technology was its influence on American military doctrine. The success of night operations during the final campaigns in Europe established a precedent that would shape U.S. military thinking for decades. The concept of owning the night, maintaining superior capability to operate in darkness, became a cornerstone of American tactical philosophy. This emphasis drove continued investment in night vision technology through multiple generations, each offering significant improvements over its predecessors. By the 1990s, American forces routinely trained for and executed complex operations in complete darkness, maintaining the advantage first established in those dark nights along the Rhine in 1945. The technological path from those early infrared scopes to modern night vision equipment reveals a consistent pattern of American innovation. First-generation passive devices, introduced during the Vietnam era, eliminated the need for infrared illuminators that could be detected by similarly equipped enemies. Second-generation systems added micro-channel plates that dramatically improved image brightness and clarity. Third-generation devices incorporated gallium arsenide photocathodes and other advances that further enhanced performance while reducing size and weight. The most advanced modern systems combine traditional light amplification with thermal imaging that can detect body heat even in complete darkness or through concealment like smoke or light foliage. Each generation represented not just incremental improvement, but fundamental technological innovation that maintained American advantage. The Gulf War of 1991 demonstrated the overwhelming superiority that advanced night vision capability provided to American forces. Iraqi forces, many equipped with Soviet-supplied Generation 1 night vision, found themselves effectively blind against American units operating with Generation 3 equipment. The ability of American forces to maneuver, target, and engage with precision during darkness created a fundamental asymmetry that contributed significantly to the rapid coalition victory. As one Iraqi officer stated during post-war interrogation, "We knew the Americans had better equipment, but we didn't understand the magnitude of the difference until the fighting began. They attacked through the darkness as confidently as in daylight, while we could barely see our hands in front of our faces." It was not a battle, it was an execution. Modern American night vision technology has evolved far beyond those early infrared scopes, yet the fundamental principle remains the same, providing warfighters with the ability to operate effectively regardless of lighting conditions. Today's systems incorporate advanced features undreamed of by the original developers: digital image enhancement, integrated thermal imaging, wireless connectivity, and heads-up displays that provide battlefield information overlaid on the night vision image. The weight has been reduced from pounds to ounces, while performance has improved exponentially. Yet, the strategic advantage remains consistent with what those first night-equipped American soldiers experienced in 1945. The ability to operate effectively when the enemy cannot, creating an asymmetric advantage that multiplies combat effectiveness. This legacy continues to influence American military supremacy today. Modern U.S. forces routinely conduct complex operations in complete darkness with a level of effectiveness that would seem miraculous to soldiers of earlier eras. Advanced night vision devices, thermal imaging systems, and integrated digital displays provide American warfighters with unprecedented situational awareness regardless of lighting conditions. This capability has been demonstrated repeatedly in recent conflicts where precision night operations have become a signature of American military effectiveness. The raid that eliminated Osama bin Laden, conducted in darkness using the latest generation of night vision technology, stands as perhaps the most dramatic example of how the technological seed planted during World War II has flowered into a capability that fundamentally shapes modern warfare. The lessons from this history remain relevant for understanding America's continuing military technological edge. First, initial research often requires visionary support despite skepticism, as President Roosevelt provided for early night vision development. Second, effective military innovation combines scientific advancement with practical battlefield application, as exemplified by the collaboration between researchers and combat veterans. Third, maintaining technological secrecy can provide decisive tactical surprise, as demonstrated by the German reaction to first encountering American night fighters. Finally, truly transformative technologies don't just solve existing problems, but create entirely new operational possibilities, as night vision did by turning darkness from a limitation into an advantage. The story of how American night vision technology helped defeat Nazi Germany represents more than just an interesting historical footnote. It exemplifies the uniquely American approach to warfare that combines scientific innovation, industrial capacity, and tactical creativity to overcome seemingly insurmountable challenges. From those early infrared scopes that first allowed American soldiers to see in the dark to the sophisticated multi-spectrum imaging systems used by today's special operations forces, the fundamental principle remains the same: technological superiority translated into battlefield advantage through intelligent application. This tradition of technological innovation directed toward clear military objectives continues to underpin American military dominance. As we face new challenges in an increasingly complex security environment, the history of night vision development reminds us that seemingly impossible problems often yield to determined, focused effort. Just as the scientists and soldiers of the 1940s refused to accept darkness as an unchangeable limitation, today's military innovators continue pushing the boundaries of what's possible, ensuring that America maintains its edge over potential adversaries. The German commanders who first encountered American night fighters in 1945 couldn't comprehend how their enemies had overcome what they believed was a fundamental constraint of warfare. Today, America's adversaries face similar moments of bewildered recognition as they encounter capabilities they didn't believe possible. That's the true legacy of America's night vision pioneers, not just the specific technology they created, but the pattern of innovation, adaptation, and application they established. It's a legacy that continues to illuminate America's path to military supremacy, turning darkness into light and transforming limitations into advantages.